Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, September 9th edition of the MMAOB Daily Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Adam Martin, and I'll be taking you guys through the latest in the world of mixed martial arts. I actually have a really good show for you guys today. I'll be recapping last night's Dana White's Contender Series, as well as previewing both of Bellator's cards this weekend. And there's a lot of fight announcements to get to. Nick Diaz potentially could return, so I'll talk about that. And Khamzat Chimaev, the UFC plans on having him fight 2 fights at once, basically. So I'll talk about that as well. And I'll take any reader questions that are sent in as well. So should be a good show today, guys. Appreciate you joining me today on Wednesday morning. Okay, so I'm going to start with Contender Series. Last night's Contender Series 32. Holy smokes. I mean, to me, this was probably one of the best episodes of Contender Series ever. I would say certainly the best this season that I can remember. This season's been really good. These fights are awesome. Like Tuesday night to have like 4 or 5 fights, it's great. It's awesome. I love it. Contender Series is, I think, one of the best ideas the UFC's come up with in a long time. Very genius idea to have this every Tuesday night. I love it. Unfortunately, there's only one more next week, and then they have a 2-month break until November. They'll be back for some more Contender Series. But I've enjoyed the first 6 episodes of this season, and we have one more episode next week, like I said. So we'll talk about this this episode from this season right now. Man, what a card, guys! Seriously, I'm going to start with. You know what? I'll actually go from the bottom up this time because I want to really get into all these fights. This was an awesome card. If you missed it, go back and watch it. It was ridiculous. So first fight of the night, and this guy's name is really tough to pronounce, but Aliaskhab Khizriev defeats Henrik Shigemoto via first round submission, and this is the guy we were talking about. He's a real stud prospect coming off a knockout win over Roosmar Paul Harris. Comes in here as a big favorite and does what everyone expected him to do. They call this guy the Black Wolf. This guy is impressive, man. 6 years of experience now. He's been fighting in M1, fighting in fight nights. 2-year layoff, comes in here in the UFC, Contender Series, basically. It's almost UFC. And then just destroys Shigemoto, takes him out in less than a minute. Gets a contract afterwards. No-brainer signing. This guy is going to be a real nice addition, I think, to the UFC middleweight division. Man, like these guys coming from Russia, some of these guys are so good. This guy looks like a really well-rounded fighter. I will say Shigemoto did land some nice strikes early in the fight. I'd kind of be curious to see him maybe fight again in Contender Series later on because we didn't get a chance to really see the fight go too long. But that speaks volumes to what Khizriev did, just taking him down and getting the submission really quick. I was very impressed by this guy's performance. For sure he gets signed. You know, he's not a huge middleweight. He's listed at 5'9", but maybe he can cut down to welterweight at some point. But definitely an impressive performance here to get a UFC contract. Next up in a bantamweight bout, we had a rare finish at bantamweight as Draco Rodriguez defeats Mana Martinez, first round triangle choke. This thing was in tight. This guy Martinez went to sleep. A nasty submission for Draco Rodriguez. He moves to 7-1 in his career. Only 24 years old. Definitely an interesting prospect. Guy with a lot of experience in King of the Cage over the last few years. Again, this is a guy with a lot of amateur fights. A lot of these guys in Contender Series, you look at their pro records, they don't have that many fights, but you look at their amateur records, they have like 10, 20 fights. This guy had 12 fights as an amateur and won all 12 of them before he turned pro, and since then he's gone 6-1. To be honest, I think some of these guys are fighting too many amateur fights. I don't think they get paid for amateur fights, and they don't go in their pro records. So I understand they want to get some experience, and that makes sense, but I think some of these guys should start turning pro a little bit sooner, to be honest with you. So, this guy is definitely impressive. Like I said, 7-1 now in his career, and he gets signed to the UFC as well. I think he's a very interesting addition to the bantamweight division. He took no damage in this fight. He even said he wants to get back in there quick. So I think him and Khizriev, with the 2 first-round finishes, they'll probably get back in there quickly. Next up, in a middleweight bout, Phil Haas defeats Kadzamura at Vestaya via first-round knockout. And wow, I mean, this was a nice knockout. I will say this, Vestaya, oh my God. You talk about bad striking defense. They call it like the tall man defense, like guys like James Vick and Stefan Struve. They just stand tall, keep their chin up. This guy is even worse than those guys. I mean, he didn't defend his chin at all. He had his hands right by his waist. So to me, I mean, this guy, he needs a lot of work for his defense. I was surprised that a pro fighter that has a 10 he had a 9-3 record going into the fight, but I'm surprised that a guy was able to win 9 fights with that kind of striking defense. His hands were literally at his waist. He didn't even attempt to block his chin. So no surprise Hawes got the knockout. As soon as I saw the fight playing out, I was like, well, this guy's getting KO'd quick. and that's exactly what happened. I mean, this guy Vestaya, he's definitely interesting because he's 6'6" at middleweight. So I mean, he's a tall dude. That's definitely intriguing going forward, but he needs a new coach, I think, and definitely a guy with like physically the skills and the potential because he's 6'6" at 185, but that striking defense is terrible. And Phil Haas took advantage of it. Full credit to Phil Haas. Gets the knockout here, a really nice knockout. Gets his contract with the UFC. A guy who's had a few chances to make it to the UFC, hasn't got in, finally gets in. I'm not really sure how well he's going to do. I mean, we've seen him lose a couple times in WSOF, on Ultimate Fighter, in Contender Series previously. He is on a 4-fight win streak. Maybe he's turned things around. He's looked a little bit better lately, a little bit more sharper since his layoff after the Marquez loss in 2017. So, maybe this is a guy who kind of went back to the drawing board and was like, okay, I have to make these changes in my game. So he's definitely been impressive lately. I'm excited to see him in the UFC as well. I'm pretty sure he'll get a fight in the next couple weeks or something, maybe a Fight Island, just because he didn't take much damage in this fight either. Next up, then, this fight, wow, what a fight. I mean, I got to be honest, like, it's hard to expect a lot from two guys with a 4-0 record. And Cameron Church and Sherrod Blackledge went in there and, to me, put on Fight of the Night. This was an amazing fight. I love this fight. First 2 rounds were incredible. Third round, yeah, they were both pretty tired. I mean, it's tough, man. The volume and the output in this fight was incredible to watch. 2 guys that only have 4 fights. Like, I sit here and I'm looking at the card and I'm like, okay, some of these guys like Phil Haas and Kizriev, guys like that, they've got some really big wins and the resume and big fight experience. Like, these are guys that, I've heard about and stuff, but I'd never heard of these guys like Blackledge and Church, and I wasn't sure what to expect. And you look at guys with 4 fights and you wonder, why are they here so quick? I can see why now. I mean, this fight was incredible. I love this fight. Blackledge wins the decision, but Church, he has got nothing to hang his head about. I mean, he was in that fight. Ultimately, Blackledge's cardio, his pace, and his wrestling was the difference. That's why he won the fight. But Church, he did a lot in the feet in this fight. He has definitely some nice striking. And Dana White said afterwards that they'll invite Church back for potentially, he said, a short notice UFC fight, which I thought was interesting because they signed Blackledge to a not to a developmental deal, but they'll give him another fight in Contender Series. So essentially the same thing, but he didn't get a UFC contract. I think it's just because Dana didn't want to give away 5 contracts. I think you could have given this guy a contract. I really do. I know he's only got 5 fights. I was very impressed by this guy's performance, man. I thought he looked good. I thought Church looked good. I'm high on both these guys, man. I'm excited to see them in their next fights. And, hopefully Blackledge wins that fight in Contender Series in November and he gets in the UFC. I think he definitely belongs. I think Church belongs too, quite frankly. So, great fight. Love this matchup. I'm sitting there watching. I'm like, wow, these guys are, it's crazy. Like some of these guys, they just started fighting pro like 1 or 2 years ago, and they've already made it this far. It's incredible the level of athlete that is entering the sport now. So these guys are impressive. Finally, main event of the evening. Holy smokes. This was my face when I saw the knockout. That was literally my face, guys. I was like, oh my God. I couldn't believe the knockout here. It was incredible. Tafon Nchukwi defeats Al Mateevo. Second round head kick knockout. And again, I was just like I couldn't believe the knockout. It was amazing. I knew this guy Nchukwi was a good prospect, and I expected him to knock this guy out, but I didn't think I'd be this impressive. I mean, this was incredible. He's only got 4 fights, but Dana White signed him, and obviously you have to sign him. No brainer. I mean, this guy could be a star, I think. I really do. I mean, I know he only has 4 fights, guys, and he just beat a guy. He's not that great. I get that. But you have to start, looking forward, and some of these guys will emerge as stars. It's really natural, I think, to compare him to Francis Ngannou. They're both from Cameroon, both just like incredible athletes. This guy is a destroyer. I mean, this head kick was vicious. He's only 25 years old. He's already 4-0. He just turned pro last year. It's insane how good this guy is already. It's crazy. So Nchukwi, man, I can't wait to see him fight again. I'm really excited. I think they'll probably turn around pretty quick too. So he'll either fight on Fight Island or he'll fight in Vegas in whenever they get back in November. So, this guy's impressive, and I'm excited to see him compete again. He is an excellent fighter and only 25 years old. And, Mateevo actually was pretty tough, and he did a little bit in the first round, but eventually got caught. I wouldn't mind seeing him back eventually either. I think he ran into a real buzzsaw here in Nchukwi. So overall, man, hats off to the fighters on this one. Hopefully the UFC gave these guys some bonuses under the table or something, because these guys put on hell of fights, man. Incredible card. Seriously, I just love the Contender Series this year. It's been so good. I'll take a question from Andre. Hey, Andre, how's it going, man? Prediction for Colby versus T-Wood. Well, I'm doing that fight next week with Cole, so I don't want to give away too much, but the odds obviously have Colby listed as a big favorite. I think that's pretty accurate. Having said that, I mean, T Wood's trained with Masvidal. He looked good in his training camp videos, and he promised to let his hands go. He said, "I will let my hands go. I promise you, fans, I'll let my hands go." That's been his problem last 2 fights. Just been really gun shy. It's been weird to watch. I mean, Woodley, he's a guy that's always kind of been like low output at times, but he usually does throw like one or two of those big strikes, and a lot of times it lands, like with the Lawler fight and stuff like that. So it's been kind of bizarre to watch him kind of just not do anything. It's the diminished version of himself. But I think he could go back to the drawing board here and start just to be a little bit more aggressive. And obviously doesn't like Colby, so he even said he wants to punch him in the nuts, which I thought was hilarious. He's like, "I'll take a point deduction. I just want to punch the guy in the nuts." I thought that was so funny. So I'm looking forward to that fight next week. I think the odds are a little bit too high in Colby's favor. I think people are writing off Woodley a little bit too much, and that's coming from a guy who's picked against Woodley's last 2 fights to Burns and Usman, where he was favored, and I picked the dogs in those fights. You also have a question about Khamzat, Andre. I'm going to get to that a little bit later because I do want to talk about that pretty much in depth. But I want to get to Bellator. Bellator definitely, there's a lot to talk about here because there's 2 cards. So let's go through Bellator 245 first and then Bellator 246. There's only a few odds out for Bellator 246, unfortunately. But Bellator 245, it does have quite a bit of odds. So Friday night, Bellator 245, that's the Davis Machida rematch card. And then Bellator 246 is Saturday. That's the mixed Archuleta card. So let's start with Bellator 245. This is on Friday. And again, we have odds for, I think, almost all the fights on the card, which is nice to see. So I'll start at the bottom, work right up. This is according to Tapology, once again. According to them, Leslie Smith will be opening the card against Amanda Bell in a featherweight bout. And right now we have Smith minus 270, Bell plus 230. Definitely could be a fun fight. I mean, 2 girls that tend to want to stand and strike, I believe. So I do think you'll probably see this fight taking place mostly on the feet. Both girls just looking to stand and bang here and putting on a good show, I think, for the fans. It could go to the ground potentially as well. Leslie Smith's been around a long time. She's got a lot of experience. She's fought a lot of really good fighters. I like Leslie Smith a lot. I mean, she's definitely a veteran of the women's divisions, and she's someone who's very outspoken for fighters' rights and stuff. So I have a lot of respect for Leslie Smith. She has some good wins in her career too, like Raquel Pennington, Jennifer Maya. I mean, Irene Aldana. She has really good wins, guys. So Leslie Smith is a stud, and she should be in the UFC right now. But she was obviously very outspoken. They released her. She's in Bellator. Seems happier there. And coming into this fight, she's coming off a loss to Arlene Blencow, which was a little bit surprising, but Blencow's a little underrated. Before that, though, I'd won 3 straight fights, including a knockout win over Amanda Lemos, who looks like a great prospect in the UFC. And again, she beat Irene Aldana, which is a huge win. So on paper, I mean, Smith has got multiple top 10 wins. So she's a little bit underrated in my opinion. She's a big favorite here. I think that's because Bell has so many losses. But Bell also is pretty experienced. She has, I wouldn't say great wins, but she has a couple notable wins. Marina Shafir, that was her big win back in the day. That's been 6 years since then, though. So, since then, she's been in Invicta. She's been in Bellator. She's fought Megan Anderson. She lost. She lost at Blencow as well. She is coming off a win, though, over Janae Harding, which was nice to see. Bella's a lot younger than Smith, too. She's 32. Smith's 38. So I think there could be up potential here, potentially. Smith has more experience. She's been in a lot of fights. But that could also be a bad thing, too, because she's taken a lot of damage. She's been in a lot of wars. My pick's going to be Smith, though. I do think her striking is going to be the difference here. I believe offensively she's more talented, gifted striker, more volume as well. And, again, more experience. But I think the line's a little high. So, I wouldn't bet on Bell either. But I'm just saying, don't go crazy on Smith here because she could lose. Next up, Keith Lee against Vinicius Zani in a catchweight 140 pounds fight. Interesting fight here. Keith Lee right now is favored at minus 240. Zani plus 200. Keith Lee, obviously the brother of Kevin Lee, and guy's a solid prospect. I wouldn't say as good as Kevin. He's only got a 6-3 record, but he is coming off 3 straight wins, so it seems like he's turned things around. And he did pick up a win over Sean Bunch in his Bellator debut. So, Keith, obviously, he's got the pedigree with the last name and everything like that, but I'd like to see a little bit more from him. I mean, to be fair, his losses were pretty close decisions. So, it's not like he was getting blown out in those fights. He's only 23 too. So I do think he can, get that record a little better. But right now, he does have some holes in his game for sure. But Vizini, I think, has a lot of holes too. 11-6 record for this guy. He's 32 years old. He's 9 years older, which I don't love. He is coming off 2 straight losses to Josh Hill and Ricky Simone, but those are really good fighters. So, this is a guy with a decent amount of experience against high-level competition. He also fought Thomas Almeida, who, well, at one point was an amazing fighter, and Patricio Pitbull as well. So this guy has a lot of experience, actually. I'm going to pick Keith Lee. I think the pedigree's there. I think this guy could be a prospect for Bellator, could be a potential contender at 135 or 145, but Zini does have a decent amount of experience. I don't think he'll win this fight, though. I think Keith Lee probably gets the fight to the ground and wins this fight by submission. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. But I don't think Zini's been stopped before by submission. Could be the first submission loss of his career. Maybe grounded pound as well. Next up, Terrell Fortune against Jack May at heavyweights. Two big boys here. Right now we got Terrell Fortune, a massive favorite, -600. Jack May, +450. I definitely could see why Fortune's favored. I mean, the guy, incredible wrestler. And before the last fight with Tim Johnson, he got knocked out in that. It was a big upset. Before that, he had run through everyone in Bellator, just took them down, beat them up. But you look at the level of competition, really, he didn't really beat anyone good except for maybe, I guess, Rudy Shafrov's okay prospect. And Azunyu and Wanyu was in the UFC for a cup of tea at one point. So I guess he's okay as well. But they're not great wins. They're okay. I don't think -600 is the right line here. To me, that's too high. Jack May, okay, the problem with Jack May, he's 39 years old, so he's a lot older, 9 years older. He's also lost a lot. You look at his last 4 fights, 2 of them by submission, so he's definitely got issues on the ground. But he does have quite a bit of experience, and he was in the UFC for a little bit as well. He's got some decent wins, not great by any means, but decent over guys like Josh Copeland, Tony Lopez. I mean, they're okay wins. He's definitely a limited fighter. We saw him in the UFC. When he gets taken down, he gets beat up pretty bad. That's kind of how the odds makers are looking at it, obviously, and everyone else is because they're parlaying Fortune. I think he does get the fight to the ground and probably finishes Jack May by submission or ground and pound TKO. But are you kidding me? I wouldn't lay -600 on this guy. Coming off that loss to Tim Johnson, no way. I just wouldn't go crazy on Jack May. I can't blame anyone if they want to throw a few bucks on Jack May here because he could get a knockout. I don't think I would, but I can see why someone would maybe take a punt on him. I'm going to pick Fortune, though. I think he wins the fight by stoppage. I just don't like the line. Next up at 205, we have Rafael Carvalho, the former middleweight champion in Bellator, taking on Alex Polizzi. And right now we have Carvalho is favorite at -140, Polizzi +120. Carvalho, obviously, a lot of experience in Bellator. He's 34 years old now, so he's getting a little up there in age. He's been in some wars. He's kind of struggled a little bit lately. He's lost 3 of his last 4, but you look a little closer. Lost to Vadim Nemkov, lost to Leon Machida, lost to Gegard Mousasi. I mean, those guys are really good fighters. Before that, he had been undefeated in Bellator. He had some nice wins. Joe Schilling, Melvin Manhoof, Brandon Halsey won the title from him, Alessio Sakara. So wasn't beating like the best guys. Obviously, he's been losing to the best guys, but he's in those fights. I mean, the Machida fight was very close, lost a split decision there. I think he's a decent fighter. Polizzi here, he's defeated at 6-0. He's only 28, so he's a little bit younger, but he hasn't fought anyone great. Daniel Jolly was in the UFC. He's got a win over him. He's not a great fighter. Jamal Pogues is, I guess, an okay prospect. But, to me, this guy could win this fight. Look at his record, 6-0 with all 6 stoppages. He is LFA champ, I believe, a light heavyweight champion. If anything, a little surprising the UFC didn't sign this guy because they do bring in the LFA champs. But, he's got upset potential. Possibly. I still got to go with Carvalho for my pick, though. Based on the experience in Bellator, based on the level of competition, I'm going to take Carvalho. Probably wins the decision here if I had to guess. But, Polizzi definitely could pull it off, too. So it's kind of a stay away from fight just because you look at Polizzi, he could be a really good prospect. We'll see what happens. He hasn't fought anyone as good as Carvalho yet. Next up, this fight should be a lot of fun. Raymond Daniels against Peter Stenonek. Right now, Raymond Daniels, -350, Stenonek +290. I believe the odds open a lot closer to a pick'em, and now Raymond Daniels is a massive favorite here. And I definitely favor Daniels. I think the line's getting a little out of hand now, but I believe it opened as a pick'em, which obviously was a mistake. Daniels should have been favored from the beginning. He is 40 years old, and we know he's been around a long time in kickboxing. He's had a lot of fights, been knocked out a lot too. But, since making the move to MMA last year, he did have one MMA fight, by the way, back in 2008 in Strikeforce, but that was a long time ago. Since getting back into the sport in 2019, he's 2-0, and he beat both the guys in Bellator by knockout. Now, having said that, the level of competition was pretty poor. 2 guys that no one's even really ever heard of in Wilker Barrows and Jason King. Who are those guys? So I get that, but this is a guy, obviously, who is a really high-level kickboxer, has been for years, and we know his spinning techniques and his kicks are incredible. So he's a lot of fun to watch. This is actually a really good fight, I think. Stenonek, 5-4 record, which I don't love. I mean, he's lost 4 times, which bothers me, but he's also a Glory kickboxer. So he's a guy that's had experience in Glory, coming off 2 straight kickboxing wins. He has fought some named fighters, I guess, not no one crazy good, but he's fought a couple guys I recognize, looking at his Tapology. I don't love the record, though, 5-4. That shows me there's holes in his game. It's possible Raymond Daniels has a better ground game. I don't expect the fight to go to the ground, but if it does, I would probably favor Raymond Daniels. He's been around a long time. He obviously trains jiu-jitsu, so I'm pretty sure he would have the advantage on the ground. I think some people believe Stenonek could get a knockout here, and I can see why, because obviously Raymond Daniels, 40 years old. I mean, that's pretty old, and he's had a lot of fights. He's been knocked out quite a few times. So I think Stenonek could catch him, but more likely than not, I think Daniels catches Stenonek, probably puts him out. So my pick's going to be Raymond Daniels. I wish it was still to pick him. I would have bet him on that. I don't love him at minus 350 just because of the age, but I do think he wins this fight. Next up, we have a middleweight bout between Ed Ruth and Taylor Johnson. Right now, Ed Ruth minus 310, Johnson plus 255. So Ed Ruth, obviously a really good just welterweight, but he's moving up to middleweight for this fight, which is kind of interesting. Maybe because of the short notice, not sure if he's going to make that move permanently, but Ed Ruth is a guy that I'm pretty high on. I mean, all of his fights have been in Bellator in his career since 2016. He's racked up an 8-2 record. In the tournament, he did lose to Neiman Gracie, but Neiman Gracie's a pretty good fighter. Since then, he picked up nice wins over Kiichi Kunimoto, former UFC veteran, and Jason Jackson, who I'm very high on. That's a good win. Split decision, close fight, but he won the fight. So to me, that's a solid win. He did lose to Amosov in his last fight, but Amosov's incredible. Amosov, I believe, is 23-0 now. He's a guy who could fight for the belt soon. So to me, no shame in that loss. I think the guy's good wrestling, improving striking. I'm pretty high on Ed Ruth. Taylor Johnson, 29 years old. He's a LFA veteran and a Contender Series veteran. He actually hasn't fought since last year when he lost to Andre Muniz, who just picked up a really nice win last week. Hard to take away a lot from that loss, but he hasn't fought in a year, hasn't fought since then, which kind of bothers me. I don't know how good he's gotten in the time since then. He does have some nice finishes on his record, 5-0, but no one really, I guess, notable either. So I don't know. I like Ed Ruth here. I mean, moving up to middleweight's interesting. Johnson could be a little bigger. We'll see. But overall, I mean, Ed Ruth, just that wrestling and that cardio and that pace, I think he'll win this fight. I'm guessing it's going to be a decision. I think he's just going to kind of wrestle this guy, but maybe he gets a stoppage too. Next up, Kat Zingano against Gabriel Holloway at 145. Zingano finally making her Bellator debut. And right now, the odds, minus 900 Kat Zingano, plus 600 Gabriel Holloway. It opened at minus 170 Kat Zingano. Gabriel Holloway opened at plus 140. So this line has been steamed like crazy in minus 900. I think people just believe it's a gimme fight for Kat Zingano. I'm honestly not so sure, guys. First off, she hasn't fought since 2018, where she lost the first round. It was like a head kick that cut her eyelid open by Megan Anderson. It was kind of a weird loss, but she's lost 4 of her last 5 fights, and she's not that active. She hasn't fought in almost 2 years. She's also 38 years old. She's also been through a lot in her personal life. This is also her Bellator debut after a long layoff. I don't know what to expect from Kat Zingano. I can't believe people are just parlaying her like this. And she's at minus 900 now. To me, that's insane. I understand that she's got the background. She has the pedigree. She has the wins. Those wins over Meerschaert, Mana Nunes, and Raquel Pennington even, those are incredible wins. The Mana Nunes fight, I mean, wow. I mean, she was getting beat up, came back and won that fight. That was on the McGregor-Poirier card back in 2014. That was impressive. The Meerschaert fight was impressive, too, the knee knockout there in the 3rd round. Meerschaert's very tough. But, since those fights, she's really struggled, guys. 4 of her last fights have resulted in loss. To be fair, she's fought good competition, Ronda, Pena, Vieira, Anderson, and she did beat Marion Renault in that stretch. But, again, she's definitely on the decline. Hasn't fought in 2 years, so it bothers me. There's a lot of things that bother me about her going in this fight, and we all know she's dealt with a lot of personal issues. She's been very vocal about that stuff. She's been very open about that stuff. Her husband committing suicide, how that affected her career. Since then, she's really struggled. It's very understandable. On paper, Kat Zingano's got all the skills. Her ground game is incredible. Her striking is incredible. But, again, hasn't fought in forever. She's 38 years old. At some time, the age is going to catch up with her. I mean, it could be now. Here's the thing. People just think Holloway's a can, basically. That's what people are looking at her as. 6-5 record. She's 30 years old. She's a lot younger. I mean, that definitely helps her, I think. And here's the thing. She hasn't fought in 3 years. She hasn't fought in even longer than Kat Zingano. That's the thing that also bothers me here about her. And her last win against Alexis Dufresne, who was in the UFC, who was not a good fighter. She did beat her by ground pound, but I mean, is that a good win? I don't know. This girl does have a decent amount of experience. I think she's actually a credible opponent. And she's fought some good competition in Bellator, like Julia Budd and Blencow, who's a pretty good fighter. And she doesn't really have any good wins, but she does have like an okay amount of experience. She's someone, I don't think she's a full-time fighter, obviously. I'm sure she has a full-time job, just does this occasionally because she hasn't fought in forever. And you look at her career, it's just been kind of sporadic. But, you know, plus 600, I'm not saying go crazy. It's worth a sprinkle, I think. I really do, because Zingano hasn't fought in forever, and I know this girl hasn't either. I don't know what to make of Kat Zingano at this point in her career. I really don't. So I'm picking Kat Zingano. She probably finishes Holloway. She probably gets to the ground and submits her or something like that. I mean, Holloway's never been stopped. I think Zingano could be someone that stops her, but I wouldn't bet on her minus 100. No chance. I would not parlay Kat Zingano here, guys. Be careful. If anything, it's dog or pass. Maybe take a shot on Holloway at plus 600, like a small punt. Don't go crazy, but we've seen upsets of women's MMA quite a few times. This could be another one potentially. So my pick is Zingano, but there's no way to bet on her. Finally, main event of the evening, the Lyoto Machida against Phil Davis 2, the rematch. And right now we have Phil Davis minus 345, the Lyoto Machida plus 285. They fought before in the UFC. They fought at UFC 163. I'm very familiar with this fight. I had a big parlay that night back when I used to do these like 5 or 16 parlays, which are very hard to do now. But back in the day, they were a little bit easier to do. But Phil Davis was Lyoto Machida was the last guy needed, and I thought he won the fight, but Phil Davis won a decision. And a lot of people thought it was kind of a questionable decision. It was one of those fights where back in the day, the judges would give a guy a round if he got a takedown with like 30 seconds left after getting outstruck, and that was exactly what happened in this fight. So I remember the fight, but 7 years later, what's changed? Obviously, Machida's a lot older now, 42, so it's even more unlikely he wins again against Phil Davis. And Phil Davis, he's 35. He's not a spring chicken by any means, but that's a significant age gap, 42 to 35. Phil Davis, obviously a big favorite here. He's had a little bit more success in Bellator, I think, than Machida so far. Obviously, he was the champion at one point. He is coming off 2 straight wins over Liam McGeary and Carl Albrechtsen by stoppage. He also knocked out Lyndon Vassell. This is a guy who throughout his career has been mostly kind of a boring fighter that just kind of wrestles guys. Since going to Bellator, and he lost a few times, since then he's kind of turned to a finisher. I mean, you look at his record, and he's actually finished quite a few of his opponents in Bellator. So, you got to give it to Phil Davis. He's pretty underrated, I think. People talk about the best light heavyweights. I'm not saying he's top 5 or even top 10. I'd say Phil Davis is a top 15 guy still. He's just not in the UFC, so people don't talk about him. But to me, he's below Ryan Bader, but not that far below him. And he's a little bit, obviously, they're both below Vadim Nemkov, who's definitely, he'd be a top 10 guy for sure in the UFC. He's awesome. But as far as Phil Davis goes, I mean, the guy obviously has great wrestling, good cardio, improving striking, improving submissions, I guess. Or he's always had a good submission game. That's always been kind of his thing. But he has holes in his game. I mean, we've seen him lose close fights, and he can lose, and he can get outstruck in the feet as well. Machida, we all know he's an amazing striker. It's funny, people were asking about the question this week, like, is Machida Hall of Famer? To me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I would put him in the UFC Hall of Fame. He was a champion. He was at one point one of like the most scary guys in the world. People were like, "Whoa, Machida! Like, you didn't want to fight him. He's like the boogeyman." He was like Khabib at one point. Like, he was looked at as unbeatable. So, anyways, I like Machida. He's definitely good, but he's also, again, 42 years old. He's coming off a loss to Gegard Mousasi. It was a competitive fight. He lost a split decision there, but before that, had won 4 straight fights, and he actually looked pretty good. Vitor Belfort knocked him out. He looked good at beating Eric Anders too. So he has like some decent wins lately. Again, I think the odds are a little bit too long here on Phil Davis. 345. He probably does win this fight. Probably takes down Machida and grinds him out, but I think the odds are too long. I mean, it's clear that some people are just parlaying like a bunch of these fighters, like Fortune, Zingano, and Davis. And usually Bellator favorites do win. So I get that. I personally would kind of shy away from that kind of betting pattern. I think that's kind of reckless here. I look at some other spots, to be honest with you. I don't know. Like, I'm going to pick Davis, guys. I think he probably grinds it out. But at plus 285, I mean, Machida could win this fight. If he keeps this fight standing, he has good takedown defense throughout his career. If he keeps it standing, he probably could beat Phil Davis. But like the first fight, Davis could sneak those takedowns in. He probably grinds it out. So I'll take Davis close decision. But again, those odds are they want you. It's like very tempting to bet on Machida at that price, I'd say. Anyways, overall, I think it's, a good card. I really do. So I'm looking forward to all these fights. I mean, most of the odds now are crazy, but there's a few that I like Keith Lee. I think he's pretty good. He should win his fight. Look at some other ones like Ed Ruth. I think should win his fight as well. So maybe those guys potentially. That actually, you parlay those two guys, Keith Lee and Ed Ruth. That's almost near even money. I think that's a decent bet. So that's kind of how I look for that. All right, let's go to Bellator 246. There's only 2 fights with odds though, so I'll just do those 2 fights just because I don't have the other odds. But I'll quickly go through those other fights on the card. So Bellator 246 on Saturday. Just really quickly listing other fights. Again, I don't have odds for them, so it's kind of hard for me to break them down without the odds. But some other notable fights on the card include Daniel Madrid against Pat Casey, Davon Franklin against Race Hilton, Ty Gorder against George Kokos, Derek Campos against Keone Diggs. That will probably have odds for it. And Liz Carmouche versus Deanna Bennett. I think you'll get odds for those 2 fights. Most likely, I'd probably see Carmouche being a big favorite there if I had to guess. And Diggs might be favored just because Campos is usually a dog. But I think Campos is a guy potentially, if he is a dog to look at in that fight. But again, I don't have odds, so it's hard for me to break it down. Going to the 2 fights we do have odds for. Co-main event, John Fitch against Neiman Gracie. Neiman Gracie right now, he is favored minus 175. John Fitch plus 135. Definitely interesting fight. I mean, Neiman Gracie, obviously the pedigree, the Gracie last name. 31 years old too. He's not that old. He's definitely a good fighter. He did lose to Roy McDonald, but it was a somewhat competitive fight. Before that, had been unbeaten in Bellator and WSOF. He didn't beat great fighters, but except for, I think, Ed Ruth's a really good fighter, so that's a great win. But other than that, most of the guys he beat were kind of like low-level guys. But he's definitely, obviously, it's Neiman Gracie. It's a Gracie, right? Like he's the lineage. He's part of the lineage, man. He's part of the new era of the Gracies. I'm very high on Neiman Gracie. I think he's just an overall good fighter. Takes on John Fitch here. John Fitch, 42 years old now. He's been around forever. He is coming off a draw against Rory McDonald. A lot of people thought he won that fight. I believe I scored that fight for John Fitch as well. So in my opinion, he probably is on a 6-fight win streak right now, including wins over Jake Shields, Yushin Okami, Paul Daly, Brian Foster. So, this is a guy who's fought everyone. He's been around forever. Obviously, he's a grinder. We know what he wants to do. He's going to take down his opponent and beat him up and grind him out. That's what he wants to do. Does he want to do it against Gracie, who has that amazing submission game? I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because John Fitch has been finished by submission before. Paul Harris tapped him out. Josh Berkman finished him by submission. So it's kind of scary to think about. I think you could get tapped out if fight goes to the ground, and that's exactly where I feel it goes. So I'm going to pick Gracie. I think he probably gets the win here, either a decision or maybe a submission. But John Fitch, again, potentially, if he just grinds it out, he could edge out a decision. Finally, main event of the evening, Juan Archuleta against Patchy Mix for the 135-pound title, the vacant belt. And right now we have Mix minus 180, Archuleta plus 140. This is a great fight. Arguably one of the best fights this weekend. Patchy Mix, 13-0, undefeated prospect, 27 years old. He's looked awesome in Bellator. He's also coming off a win in Ryzen, which was nice to see. But this guy's fantastic. He's got really good wins too over Andre Ewell, Tony Gravely, Ricky Bandejas. Those are nice wins. He's a guy the UFC missed out on, I think. Look at his record. A lot of finishes by submission. He's a dangerous guy. Juan Archuleta, 24-2. Another guy that could be in the UFC. He's a really good fighter. Trains with TJ Dillashaw. He's awesome. Coming off a win over Corrales. Bounced back from that loss to Pitbull. That snapped a long win streak. Juan Archuleta is seriously a good fighter, man. And moving down to 135, it could be a good move for him. He has fought there, obviously, in the past, but going for the belt there is interesting. I like Mix a lot, but I mean, Archuleta, again, super experienced guy. He's a very dangerous guy. I'm very high in Mix, though. I got to go with Mix. I think he'll get the job done, but man, Archuleta is solid. So great fight. This is one of the best fights this weekend. Should be a good one. All right, let's get through a few other things, and I'll get out of here. Nick Diaz announced his return to UFC. The odds are out now. You can bet on who he can fight again. There's like Robbie Lawler, Mike Perry, Darren Till, a couple other guys, Carlos Condit. Anderson Silva's on the list. There's a few other guys. You guys can take a look at it. The odds are all out there now. BJPen.com, I have the odds. My guess is Lawler. That's the fight I think is going to make sense the most for both guys at this point. Lawler coming off 4 straight losses. Diaz having not fought in 5 years, 6 years next year. So I think that fight makes a lot of sense. Rematch. I'd love to see that fight personally. Condit's also a good fight, I believe. One of those two guys, I think, are going to be the fights. I don't think it'll be McGregor. I don't think it'll be Masvidal. I think it'll be someone who's a veteran. That's who I would pick. I'd be curious to see what you guys say. John Dodson announced he's moving back down to flyweight. I think that makes sense for him. He's kind of been inconsistent lately at bantamweight, so going back down to flyweight later in his career, one more title run. And you know what? That division is pretty shallow. He gets a win over a guy like Brandon Moreno in his debut. He could get a title shot after that. I found this kind of interesting. Nate Quarry was talking on his Twitter, and he said that he's still under contract with the UFC like 10 years after his last fight. They were talking about Nick Diaz's contract and how it's still part of the UFC's at their dispense, I guess, 6 years after his last fight. And Nate Quarry said, I fought 10 years ago and I retired. And they said, you're still under contract now. So, Nate Quarry's obviously a very outspoken guy about fighter rights. Interesting comment, though, for sure. I thought that was kind of intriguing that he said that. But, we know those two contracts are very ironclad. So I guess no surprise there. And Ricardo Lamas retired from MMA, made it official this week. Great career. Not a Hall of Famer by any means. Hall of Good. There's Hall of Good, Hall of Very Good, Hall of Fame. He's in the Hall of Good, I think. But definitely a solid career, man. He had some good wins. Charles Oliveira, man, resubmitted him. And he had that fight with Max Holloway. He won a bonus for his last fight for Fight of the Night against Bill Algeo. What a way to go out, right? Going out of the win. Not only that, but that's his only Fight of the Night award in the UFC, which is crazy because he's been in a lot of wars. That was the only one he ever won Fight of the Night for. I thought the Diego Sanchez fight was also a great fight, too. So he's a good fighter. I did interview him with James back in 2015, I think. Great guy, and we loved interviewing him. This is when he was kind of on his title run, too. So he's an awesome dude, and, hopefully he has a great retirement. And he could be a guy that does return again one day. A lot of these guys get hungry after a year or two off, but he did get knocked out brutally by Calvin Kattar, and I think he said that kind of changed the way he looked at the sport after that brutal knockout, and you can see why. But, man, what a way to end your career with a win, right? That's the best way to go. Chris Lytle, Ricardo Lamas, GSP, going out in the win. That's the idea. But you keep trying to win. To be like Anderson Silva, he hasn't won forever. He wants to get that last win. Couple of fight announcements. All right, so here's a couple I want to get to. First off, in the women's flyweight division, Rachael Ostovich returns after USADA suspension, and she fights Gina Mazany. And I was talking to Cole about this. I was like, man, I mean, this is a kind of a low-level fight here, and the odds actually dropped. Gina Mazany's a favorite. How is Gina Mazany a favorite over anyone? That just blew my mind. So maybe take a look at Ostovich as a dog there. Probably can finish Mazany. Jeff Hughes versus Juan Espino at heavyweights. Juan Espino, a former tough winner. I'm very excited to see him return to the UFC. It's going to be nice to see him back in the octagon. Take on Jeff Hughes here. I expect Espino to be favored in that fight. Next up, Carla Esparza against Amanda Ribas. Interesting fight. I mean, we've heard that Ribas did want to fight Esparza, and Esparza was open to it. So I'm totally cool with this matchup. I do think it's a pretty good fight. I had a question for Kevin Scott, an email question. I want to read it from you, Kevin. I read that Ribas Esparza is in the works for December. Any prediction on the line? Esparza always disrespected by the odds makers, and Ribas coming off a great win over Page. I'm thinking maybe Ribas minus 450. That's not how I'd set it personally. I think Ribas around minus 225 is more fair, but cashing easily at minus 1,200 in her last fight against Page won't quiet the Ribas hype. He thinks that the line is going to be a little bit too high based on how competitive it could be. And I'm completely with you, by the way, Kevin. We all pick against Carla every fight. I've been doing it the last couple of fights, and it hasn't worked out too well. I mean, she's been winning these fights, close fights, but she's grinding them out. Ribas, though, is on the next level, right? I thought Paige had a chance potentially in the last fight after seeing the way Ribas ran through her. And I'm not saying Paige is better than Carla, but just the way she did it was so impressive. So, I think Carla could be competitive, but I expect Ribas to win. I think Ribas will even have the advantage on the ground, which is kind of rare in Esparza fights. Usually she has the wrestling advantage. I'm not sure if she will in this fight, which is going to be a problem for her because on the feet she's going to be in trouble. The other thing I want to get to here is Gerald Meerschaert versus Khamzat Chimaev. I'm going to get through this quick, but I know Marcus had a question last night about it. I wasn't able to get to it in yesterday's podcast. So I want to talk about this now. It's even better now, actually, that we talk about it because Dana talked about Khamzat last night, and he explained why they haven't booked for 2 fights. Basically, he's like Khamzat wants to fight often, and I was cool with it. And I think it's fun, it's interesting. That's what Dana was saying. He's like, it's cool, it's fun. Like that's his rationale. I thought it was hilarious. So this guy's booked 2 fights right now. He's going to fight Gerald Meerschaert next weekend in Vegas on the 19th of September, and then he's fighting Damian Maia. I think they said he's fighting him in Vegas too in November. So that's going to be I believe, the plan. I thought the plan was to do it on Fight Island for a second fight against Maia, but it looks like it's going to be in Vegas too. It's pretty nuts. I thought the rationale was hilarious. I was laughing when Dana was saying it. Like, he was just trolling the media so hard there. They love this guy. They think he's going to be the next big thing. The line is actually out for Meerschaert versus Khamzat, and it's crazy, as you expect. Khamzat minus 600, minus 610, Gerald Meerschaert plus 425. I think Gerald can win this fight, though. I mean, he was supposed to fight at light heavyweight in his last fight against Ed Herman, so he's a huge guy. I think he has fought light heavyweight and he's did okay. Khamzat is a guy who's fighting a welterweight and middleweight. It's kind of weird, right? He's fighting in two divisions at once. Dana thinks that he could make a run at both ladders at the same time. Imagine that, one guy doing like winning fights like back to back like this in two divisions. It's nuts. If he can go in there and dominate Gerald Meerschaert, I mean, this guy, if he dominates Gerald Meerschaert, like, you have to talk about him as a title challenger like soon. If he beats Meerschaert and then beats Maia, he might get a title shot after that. I mean, a lot guys have got title shots after beating Maia. Why wouldn't Khamzat if he does that? Anyways, the UFC loves this guy. I love him too. I think he's great. I just think Meerschaert, with the size and the submissions, he's really good in the ground. Potentially, Gerald Meerschaert, this could be another situation. We've seen a lot of prospects lose in the UFC history. Like, over the years, tons of prospects have gone in there and they've been expected to win. Like, say Northcutt. I'm not saying Khamzat is these guys. Khamzat looks like Khabib to me. He looks like Khabib 2.0. I think a lot of us don't think that too. So Khamzat's awesome. And that wrestling, that ground and pound, the submissions, the cardio, the pace. There's so much to like about this guy. And he's so young too. I think he's like 25, right? I'm just saying, like, Gerald Meerschaert's a massive step up over John Phillips and Rhys McKee. John Phillips, he's just basically a slugger. He has no ground game. And Rhys McKee never fought in the UFC. I mean, he's not an experienced guy. Dana White was saying, these were two real opponents. These were two really tough fights. I don't really agree with that. Meerschaert's a way tougher fight. Robert, I see your question. I'm going to get to all of them in one sec, man. But I like your comment here. He said, Meerschaert would be a good test for Khamzat. I agree. It's going to be a good test, but Khamzat should win the fight, guys. I get that. I'm going to obviously pick Khamzat like everyone else is, but I think Meerschaert plus 425. I mean, that's another punt you could take. I said that about a lot of fights today, but some of these lines are really getting out of hand. It's MMA. You see upsets, and there's been a lot of them recently. All right, I'm going to get to your questions now, Robert. Thank you so much for waiting. Next for Leon Edwards, I think it's got to be Stephen Thompson, right? Because you look at the rankings, and he's the only guy available. Thompson's out there now calling on Nick Diaz. He wants to fight Nick. I guess they might do that fight, potentially. I doubt it, though. I think Nick will fight Robbie Lawler or Carlos Condit. Those are my two picks. Lean towards Lawler. But for Edwards, I'd say, I think Stephen Thompson. That'd be a great win. He's got to stay busy. He hasn't fought in over a year. So I know he wants a title shot and everything. Maybe he wants to wait for the winner of Usman Burns. Maybe that's his plan, which I think is kind of nuts because he won't be able to probably get that shot until like next summer. He should fight once again. And looking back now, I mean, I love Leon Edwards. He's got an 8-fight win streak. He already has a loss to Usman, first off. And second off, his last win was against RDA, who's down lightweight now. So looking back, it's not like an amazing win that should get you a title shot. He needs one more win. He beats Thompson, especially if he finishes him. That's potentially title shot worthy. Next for Sean Brady. Sean is a really good prospect. I think maybe a top 15 guy. I mean, it's hard to say. I don't think these guys are going to fight him. They won't be eager to. Like, Lawler's ranked 15. He won't fight him. Pettis, no. Like, so he's probably going to fight a guy who's not ranked. Just looking maybe at some fights coming up, even on this card. Is there any welterweight fights? There's mostly lightweight fights on this card. Probably someone who's fought recently. Maybe even the winner next week, Donald Cerrone against Nico Price. Potentially, maybe that guy, like Nico Price, could fight if he wins. Something like that. I think someone in that area, even like the winner of Baeza Gall. That's kind of how I'm looking for Sean Brady. But I think he's good, man. I just don't think these top 15 guys are going to be eager to fight this dude because he's hungry, young, and he's good. When will Peter Yan fight Aljo? I think Dana White said they're working on that. That's what he said last night. He touched on a bunch of things. It was a pretty good scrum. He said they're working on Ultimate Fighter. They're going to start filming it soon. I think in November. They're going to start filming Ultimate Fighter. But right now they're doing the Fight Island thing, and then obviously Ultimate Fighter, Contender Series when they get back to Vegas. He said they're working on a bunch of stuff. I think he said one of the matchmakers was sick, and they had to delay their matchmaking meetings. But I think that fight will be booked soon. Looking ahead at some of these cards, that UFC 255 card, that's the Garbrandt card against Figueiredo and Shevchenko against Ribas, maybe you get another title fight on that card. Maybe you have 3 title fights on that card. Also, the pay-per-view in December, Usman versus Burns and Anderson versus Nunes, you probably have a 3rd title fight on that card. They like to stack that year-end card. So maybe you'll see that fight then. I like to see it sooner. I think that'd be a great fight for Fight Island Yan versus Aljo, but we'll see. Anyways, I think that's it. And you see a quick look, but I'm pretty sure I got everything I wanted to talk about, guys. Obviously, I did talked a lot here. Let's see here. Yeah, that's pretty much it. All right. Okay, I'll take your last question, Robert. And then I'll get out of here. Top welterweight prospects. Sean Brady, Miguel Baeza, Khamzat Chimaev, Rodriguez. Which Rodriguez is that? Chaos Williams, he's good too. How do you think they stack up? Can you just tell me which Rodriguez you're talking about? For some reason, my brain can't think of him right now. Brady's great. They're all good, man. But obviously, Khamzat is the top guy for sure. I like Chaos Williams, though. I mean, I haven't seen him fight in a while, right? Like, I want to see how he's back. He said Daniel Rodriguez. Sorry, man. Daniel Rodriguez is like in his 30s. I think he's 34. So, like, that's kind of why I wasn't thinking about him as a prospect. But he's good, too. How would I rank them? Khamzat number 1, Sean Brady number 2. I mean, the next couple of guys, kind of hard to say. Probably Baeza, Williams, and then Rodriguez. Like, I feel bad ranking him last, but he's a little bit older than these other guys, I believe. Cannonier versus Whitaker winner. They probably get a title shot, right? Jared Cannonier beats Whitaker. He's getting a title shot. He deserves it. All right, that's it for today's show, guys. I really appreciate you sticking around today and listening to me talk about Bellator and the other stuff. You guys can follow me on Twitter at MMAOB. Podcast is available at MMAOddsbreaker.com. Go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, please, and like it and all that stuff. Also, I'm on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, a bunch of other places. So definitely check me out there. Also available at bjpen.com. MMARankings.net. Just posted an article at MMARankings.net. I listed 5 potential opponents for Nick Diaz. Would definitely appreciate if you guys could check that article out. What else? Okay, so next week, I'm actually, usually I don't do the podcast Wednesday, but it's my birthday this weekend. I'm going away with my girlfriend to a place for a couple of days. So it's going to be nice to get away. So I'm just taking a couple of days off, which I think I could definitely use. And I'm sure we all could. I will watch the card this weekend for sure. I'll be back on Tuesday, 10 a.m. with Cole. We'll be breaking down next weekend's card of Covington Woodley. And then next Thursday, 10 a.m., I'll just be doing the regular show talking about the news. But I do have a guest that day. It'll be Chris Rinney, who is an artist who works for Bloody Elbow, and he does artwork, and he's incredible, and I love his art, and it's amazing. So I'm really excited to talk about him. He's actually releasing a book, I think, next week. So we were talking, and I want to get him on to talk about his new book and talk about his art, and he's got some other things to say about, let's say, just people working for free in this business for people that have money. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. So it'll be interesting. So definitely check it out on Thursday next week. But yeah, I have a couple of days off here, guys. So it'll be nice to get some R&R. I've been doing the grind for a while now, so nice to get a little break. I hope you guys have an incredible rest of the week. Hope you have an awesome weekend. And I'll be back next Tuesday, 10 a.m. with Cole Sheldon to break down UFC Fight Night. Have a great weekend, everyone. Enjoy the fights. Bye.